So with Black Friday, so this is our Black Friday week Q&A. Last week we did, if you're part of our Q4 bootcamp or if you're part of our Momentum, we did some Black Friday tips. I put those up on YouTube just earlier tonight, just for just a section of that call for people who, if you wanted to send people to it, just so people can have some more resources. So if you could be feeling at this point in time in your Amazon business like this, or you might be feeling a little bit more like this. And know that both of those things are okay. I've talked to people today that have, had scheduled calls, weeks ago that were in great places, really excited. But I've taken a lot of, calls today that, people were freaking out about one thing or they had something really bad happen on their account and they were trying to figure out how to kind of recover, what their next steps were. So, some of these questions have come from those conversations and some of them have been emailed to me ahead of time. So, one of the things that we want to remember as you're heading into Black Friday, if you're planning on shopping, we never recommend that you spend more in inventory than you can afford to lose. So with the amount of, one of the things that you have to consider, especially if you're thinking about leveraging debt in order to purchase this inventory, if it doesn't work out, if the ASIN gets restricted, if something else happens, what is your plan B going to be? And we want to make sure when you're buying with cash, and then it makes it a little bit easier. If you can't sell it, then you're going to find a way to move it. If you're buying on credit, and I'm not saying credit's bad, credit used well has built most of America's businesses, but it can put a little more pressure on you. Now, if you've already overbought, I talked to one person today who had kind of overextended themselves and they were a little bit nervous about going forward. Then you're going to stop buying unless you have really solid replans that you know it's going to sell because you have a past history. Then you're going to focus on moving what you've already bought. So we're going to talk about a couple things that you can do if you've already spent your money that tonight, and then we're also going to be talking about some things for those of you who are planning on shopping, still a little bit further. One of the questions that I got was, how do I know how much inventory I have? There's two ways. The easiest way is to look at Inventory Lab under FBA inventory. It's inventory, FBA inventory. You'll get this. I stole this right off of Google, so I don't know whose numbers these are, but I stole them. I'm sorry. And then with the inventory health report, you're going to follow these things. So you can take a little screenshot of this. You're going to hide columns A and columns B. So if you right click on if you select the columns and then right click, you can select hide them. You're going to insert a new column. You're going to put this formula in there. And then you're going to drag that formula down. So you're going to click right here and drag it all the way down. And at the bottom of them, you're going to add this formula where this equals the sum and then the parentheses of, if you just click it, make sure that it should show all of the numbers in the highlighted. See how it's got these little pieces right here? That's a great way to do that. Now, so Inventory Lab's obvious, easy. If you're in our beta for our dashboard, I'm going to show you how to find that as well. So online and retail arbitrage checklists. So if you're like, well, what do I do next? Because I've been doing retail arbitrage, I've been really hitting it heavy, and now I'm not sure what I should do now. Should I keep buying? Should I be focusing on other things? I would take a moment, before tomorrow and just take a heartbeat. So you make sure you're not buying on like a frenzied panic, because you want to make sure that, because when your emotions are in really high or you're really happy or really upset, your IQ drops 15 points. So you want to make sure that you're thinking with a clear head before you head into Black Friday. These are the things that I recommend that you do tomorrow, to take a moment, make sure you have a clear head and you really have an idea of where you are at and what is needed. So I'm going to add in here that you need to know how much inventory you have in stock, and then ship anything that's already purchased. If you have items that you have not shipped, my recommendation is not that you go shopping on Friday, it's that you get what you have in. Unless you're holding it on purpose, you always ship before you shop when you're under a time crunch like this, because we need to get those items in. So unless you intentionally held it to manage storage fees or inventory levels, then we need to get it shipped. If, you might even want to prep things. If you're going to be sending smaller shipments as you head in, then, you might want to get them prepped, so all you have to do is put them in the boxes. The next thing you should do is check for stranded inventory and suppressed inventory. Every year I talk to at least one seller. Last year I talked to 7. They all came from another program, and they hadn't checked their stranded or suppressed inventory throughout the entire Q4 period. One of them had 175 of an item that was Christmas specific that didn't sell at all because he didn't realize that they had been gone into a stranded status. So something aired out between the time he shipped it. And so even though he had them all in his inventory, they weren't selling because he still got charged storage fees for them, but they weren't selling. So especially if you have a lot of SKUs, take a moment and look at stranded and suppressed inventory. The reason I say especially if you have a lot of SKUs, because if you have only 3 SKUs, you'll notice if something is stranded or suppressed a lot faster than maybe somebody who's doing retail arbitrage and has a ton of different items. Check in on and reconcile those, lost shipments or any shipment things. So kind of go through your shipments, make sure that everything that should be checked in is checked in, get tickets set up so you can make sure that you have enough time to get that inventory back online if possible before before the real, the big buying season in December. And that if you are going to get paid out on lost inventory, we want it to happen during December and not during January. The reason for that is that they're going to base it off of the current selling price, and the selling price is probably going to be higher in early December than it is going to be in January, especially for toys. So this is something that if you're not going to do tomorrow, then you want to put it on your list for mid-December at least, because you want to get paid out on the higher price. And we all know that there are going to be some prices that tank after Thanksgiving and after those Black Friday shipments get in. So now is a really good time to reconcile those lost shipments so you can get paid a slightly higher amount. And then you're going to look at your aged inventory. So anything that's been there over, in this case, I might even look at things that are over 30 days, but for sure over 90 days, and we're going to reprice, enhance, run sponsored ads, or dump. You need to get rid of it if it's something's already aged, unless it's like a summer piece that you're going to have to hold and you had high margins on, we need to get rid of that, right? So make sure you do that. And then if you're going to shop for Black Friday, then make sure you have extra margin, especially on national deals. If you go to a national store, the more the distribution, so the greater the number of stores, the bigger potential for an item to tank, because there's more opportunities for people to purchase it. Multiple, if a store is only in 4 states, items still could tank, but if it's in 50 states and there's 60 stores in every state, then that's going to be even more likely, no matter how much demand there is for a product, that item could tank, especially if it's a really big deal. So if it went from an item that's normally priced 30 down to 10, people are going to run extra hard to get those items. So build in that margin for those. So, I said look at the aged inventory. If you like to do it manually, we have the spreadsheets in the Academy to pull these charts yourself. But if you're in our beta for the dashboard will tell you a number of items, and these are an average over the last 30 days. And then same here. So this is another client's data that said it was okay anonymously to share their data. So we went ahead and showed it. This person has a mix of books, has a lot of books actually, and so their long-term books are the reason that their graph looks like this. This would normally be a very unhealthy. So if this was retail arbitrage or private label, this would be a very unhealthy business as far as inventory, because we're seeing that the smallest range was 90 days. It's because they are by design a certain way. And then on the dashboard, this is going to be the gross sales this is going to be the average for the day. So you can see the daily average on this is up, and this is the net sales. And then you can set this gauge if you're in the dashboard. You set where that gauge is going to be. So we set 50,000 here and 5,000 net here. So you can kind of see. And then the inventory, this is why it's still in beta. We lost a couple days of data, but it will tell you your inventory, and then once this is fixed, it will show you a graph showing your inventory level going up or down. So these are the number of suppressed and quality issues that this account is having. And so you can see that, you can keep track. So we should see the numbers moving up and down as you're fixing them. If you're private label or wholesale, then here's some things that you should be checking for. You want to check for your age inventory, and then especially for things that are aged. Paul, I did see that email today, and we're going to get that fixed because that's something that's not working. So I'm going to get that. I'm going to send you an email on that. So with the wholesale, look at the detailed sales and traffic for buy box also, especially if you're in a wholesale area and you're competing against other people, and you're sharing the buy box with multiple sellers. Then what you really want to do is you want to make sure that when you have the buy box, you're selling as many as possible. So running some sales and some sponsored products can help you make sure that when you do have the buy box, you're making more sales of those items. So, I'd recommend maybe doing a sale, a promotion or coupon, and then check the search term report, and you might want to increase your spend slightly on those keywords that are doing really, really well for you. But if nothing else, think about how you shop for Black Friday. When you come across something that's not on sale, even if it was on your Christmas list, how often, if it's not on sale, do you say, well, I'll come back and get that later because it's not on sale? So even a small sale like 5% can make a big difference in having somebody convert today versus later, and they might not come back to your particular ASIN. So sales, promotions, and coupons are a great thing. If you know that you're going to run a promotion and you have access to an email list, this is a good time of year to send that. You might want to send it, a little bit later. Try to time it so it's not when everybody else is. Think of a really good headline. For just a reminder that Black Friday is not the peak sales days for most sellers. I've already had a couple sellers reach out nervous that their sales are not growing fast enough for them, and they're nervous. Remember, we're still in the preseason. So for most years, our biggest sales days have been somewhere between, around the December 18th, a couple days before, a couple days after. And a lot of other sellers have that too. Now, it's going to depend on your product mix. So if you sell only Christmas wreaths, you're going to see your peak earlier than maybe somebody who sells, the organization stuff to put away Christmas trees. Or somebody who is maybe selling items that are more that people buy for themselves with gift cards. So depending on the product mix, you're going to see sales at different points. And we have to think about how your repricing strategy is going to affect those sales too. If you're trying to drive for the most sales and you're really aggressive in your repricing, then yes, your sales will skyrocket for Black Friday. But are you going to be taking away a lot of profit? One of the things that I saw in another group is people talked about, would I rather sell, more items at a higher price or less items at a lower price? And it was interesting. Most people were saying they would rather sell more items at a lower price. If you're somebody like Dan and Eric or Eddie or somebody who has a big logistics section and can bring in employees to pack their boxes that have access to a ton of capital, then you can scale up as much as you want. And so you're not limited by time. So that gives you a huge advantage, right? But if you're a solopreneur, maybe it's you and two other people, there's a finite number of boxes that you can pack. So if you get up towards that number, then you're going to just start to run yourself ragged. And so you have to start looking at making a decision to bring on more people, or of those finite number of things that you can pack, how can I make more profit off of each individual item? So we want to look at profit per hour, not just sales. So your repricing strategy, if you're holding out for the best prices on some things that the supply is not going to meet demand, you're already seeing the supply chain is not holding up, and you've talked to the manufacturer, that nobody's getting any more in stock, then if you're holding out on your price, then other people are going to sell first, and that's okay. So you might not see that same peak that other people are seeing for Black Friday. And that wouldn't indicate anything is wrong. That would indicate that your sales are matching your repricing strategy. So with your repricing strategies, you want to make sure if you don't have a repricer, you really are clear on what things you're going to reprice up and reprice down. I think most people that are, past the, if you're planning on doing more than $10,000 or $20,000 in December, which I know most of you are, then I would recommend a repricer. We had that whole thing with Be Cool, which is also on YouTube. So if you're not part of the Academy, you can still catch that on YouTube. I think it's really important, so I put those two things on YouTube. And you want to test it with 5 SKUs that have up and down pricing. Make sure that they're pre-pricing the way that you want, and then apply it to your other SKUs. You should have some repricing rules that are going to focus on driving the price up with scarcity, some that are going to focus on maintaining the buy box, and some, if you have items that are already aged and you just need to use the velocity of the season to get things moved, then that's where you're going to put your aggressive price repricer. So you're going to have, some of you are going to have more complicated than just those 3 rules, but that's a good place to start. So one of the questions I got is, should I hold this item and see if it rises in price or move now? Should I try to reprice it so it moves now? We're going to talk a little bit about when you're looking at supply and demand. So it's all if you see that supply is drying up, so the number of sellers is shrinking, not growing. Stores don't have it in stock. They tell you that they don't think that they're going to get in stock. You've called the manufacturer for wholesale. They've told you that they've got their last shipment for the year. Maybe you might get something in late January. All of those things are going to tell you that the price is going to go up. If we see a lot more sellers coming in, we see the price starting to jump and soften, then we need to move it now. So the other thing to think about is, will this sell in January too? If you hold it and you're trying to edge up for the higher price and it doesn't work out for you, will this sell in January? So you need to think about your risk tolerance as well. So if you're worried about the price softening, so I talked to a couple people today that had bought really heavily into a couple SKUs and they were worried about the price tanking on them. I would check for Black Friday specials on that item nationally, even if you got it wholesale. So let's just say I was buying Zuzu Pets wholesale. And, I wanted to see if, my large investment of Zuzu Pets was actually going to work out. And I'm worried that maybe the price might tank on it. It's been really good, but I'm worried. What I'm going to do is I'm going to Google Black Friday special Zuzu Pet. And I'm going to see, if I see Target and Walmart are both running really great Zuzu Pet deals, that's an indication that I might need to be worried. Because a lot of people are going to come in, they're going to get those at maybe a lower price than I paid wholesale for them, and they're going to flood the market. So now I need to think about, how do I make sure that my items get sold before all of this extra supply hits? That's going to be sponsored products. So when you sell more when you have the buy box, it might be being a little bit more price competitive so you get the buy box more. You're also going to watch the number of sellers, and then you might even call a couple of big box stores. So even if you've been sourcing these Zuzu Pets at Toys R Us, you might call a couple around the country and say, hey, I was wondering how many, I was thinking of coming down, do you guys have any Zuzu Pets in stock? And if you don't know, Zuzu Pets are like they couldn't give these things away for a while, but they were a really hot seller. It's like a gazillion years ago, like 7 years ago. But you can call and ask and see if they have them available. So you're going to call and if they say, oh, no, we've been out of stock for those for weeks, and we don't expect to get any more, or, we're getting some on Monday, but you should get here really early. The lines have been crazy for those. That means the supply is not meeting the demand and that you can probably hold out for a higher price. If they say, oh, yeah, we got plenty of those and we have another shipment, we're having doing a big thing on Black Friday for them, the price is probably going to soften because the supply is going to meet the demand, maybe exceed it. So when the number of sellers are increasing, you're seeing Black Friday sales, you're going to want to be more aggressive. That doesn't mean you need to tank the price. You can use sponsored products, headline search if you have brand registry, which is not going to be the case for anybody who's doing arbitrage. But there's lots of other things that you can try to do to make sure that those move. If the supply is outpacing demand, so that nobody can keep it in stock, then that's going to be when you really are focusing on developing a repricing strategy with your repricer, that it's holding that price higher than everybody else, waiting for them to sell out. And that's really, so you need to look and see where you're going to be at, and that's going to help you to, that's what I would do to determine. Now, there's always things we don't think about or things we're not going to catch, but that would be where I would start. The other question we had was about storage fees. Don't forget, monthly storage fees are really, really high. So you want to look at your reports or your dashboard to see how many things have been there for a long time. You might want to do multi-channel fulfillments. You might even call things back to resend them in January. I don't really recommend that because if something's going to sell, it's probably going to sell in January unless it's like a summer swimsuit. If you have a kayak at Amazon, yeah, you should probably pull that back because the storage fees are going to be insane for it. And it's probably, I don't know if kayaks sell in December, but I'm assuming that they might not because most lakes are frozen over. So, think about, are these things likely to move? How can I get them to move? And then you also want to think about, as you buy these things for Black Friday, you might decide to stagger these shipments. So if you're it's a big national sale, you need to get everything in as quickly as possible, and know you're probably going to get hit by these storage fees. If you know that you can send, that you're going to have steady sales and you got a ton, then you might send 50 in this week and then send 50 in next week and then send the next 100 the following week, if you think that it's something that's going to sell more heavily at the end of December, beginning of January. So you want to look at when things are going to be selling, and you might want to stagger things out, but we want to remember that these warehouses do get extremely backed up this time of year. There's always some sort of crazy snowstorm that makes things worse. So you want to think about that and mostly manage things by having them move, and then be thinking about this as you're making these last decisions. Ideally, we should have been thinking about this for the last several months as we've talked about the storage fees. And like not buying things that are big and light that aren't going to move. The storage fees have been pretty ambiguous. It looks like it's an average over the 30 days. That it's an average of the 30 days that they've had based on volume. So they look at the volume that you've had in the warehouses over 30 days, and they average that out, and that's how they charge you. That's our understanding. They make it really convoluted in the descriptions and stuff, but that's been what we've seen so far. You can also extend your season by selling locally. Items that have hard to find have been selling on Facebook, or you can sell them on Facebook. So if you know that you just don't have any time to get things in for FBA, you might look at things that people are having a hard time keeping in stock that maybe even are restricted on Amazon, and sell them on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist. Be prepared for people to be jerks about that. They're not going to be happy. If you know you're going to be focusing on wholesale or consulting, this is a great time to capture data to show brands how competitors have really maximized Amazon to outpace them. We have our event in January that's coming up. And I've seen this in a couple of questions that have come up. I just want a quick reminder for those that are pursuing wholesale. Brand registry is not a gating service, and false intellectual property claims against sellers are illegal and just plain wrong. I put plan wrong, but I meant plain wrong. Please don't file false or encourage brands to file false IP claims, especially during this Christmas. I mean, they could be filing a claim against somebody that you know and love in this community. So if somebody has an actual copyright thing that's been taken, or an image that has been used, then yes, file an intellectual property claim for that. But warn the sellers on the listing first that you're going to do it, why you're doing it. Let's treat others the way that we want to be treated. And don't try to file things to get people off the listing. It's not going to stick, and it could put the brand that you're representing into long-term trouble. So don't do it. Should you still be buying for Black Friday? If I was going to buy on Black Friday, I've got a lot of family in town. couple other things that were not this year. I would focus on items for January, so that things that I'm going to hold it. If I had enough cash flow, I'd wait out the tank and then send them in January. Items that I knew would do well for gift cards. So maybe not even toys, maybe more health, well-being, those kind of things. Or I would focus on getting the items shipped by Saturday, by Saturday or Monday, get them in as quickly as possible. And I would be focusing on non-toy items that are going to get a seasonal bump. So things that you buy at grandma, grandpa, mom, Aunt Cindy, those are the things that that I would be looking for, because everybody's going to be freaking out about toys. And it makes it a very volatile market. Somebody asked me if I thought people should buy the Black Friday lists. I would not use those lists personally. I'm not saying they're not great. I'm just saying I would, if I used them at all, I would use them as an idea or niche generator. So I would look and see. I would look at the Black Friday list and say, oh, you know what? It looks like Ninja Turtles are back. I should be looking for things that are Ninja Turtle, but not these things, because these are on sale at Toys R Us and Walmart. So I need to find maybe some different items in the same franchise, right? I would be looking for regional stores or stores that are really hard to get to. So ones that have maybe one or two stores that are hard to, that maybe are in like the corners of towns, and they're a pain to check out of. I'd look for some sort of barrier of entry so that people who are kind of on a mad dash wouldn't take the time to come to them. And okay, so that was all the questions that I got pre-questioned on, which was a lot. That was like 27 minutes. My apologies. I didn't realize how many of those were. What other questions can I answer for you? Somebody said that they wanted a pep talk too. So I know that some of you have been, it can be really stressful. And especially if you have a lot invested, which a lot of you do. So, right now is not the time to second guess. Everything that's in is in, right? So what are the things that I need to do in the next 2 weeks that can increase my profit by at least, 10%? We're going to prioritize those things first. So if you don't have enough inventory in, then I would be focused on finding merchant fulfilled items and focusing in on those. I would probably look for things that maybe are hazmat or something along those lines, something where other FBA sellers aren't able to sell it, and I would be focusing on that. I don't really speculate on toys. I don't buy toys hoping that they will go up, but I know a lot of people do. And then when you're looking at what else needs to be done with the inventory that I've already bought, is it optimized? Is it repriced? Am I set up to get the maximum amount of money for what we've already done? And then what are the things that I can get sent in quickly? Denise asked, when do you think the last date to get items for Christmas sales in? I have a fair amount of time to sell through that. So it's a great question. It's a question we get every year, and it's going to depend more than ever. It used to be everybody had about the same amount of time. Unfortunately, it's not a fair playing field anymore, because I talk to some sellers who have really great warehouse distribution. They're not using premium placement, but their items go to someplace close to them and for their product mix. And so they can send in a lot later than maybe some of the clients that we have that on average it takes 10 to 14 days for items to get shipped in. So you have to look at what is the average time it takes from when I ship my items to when they get shipped into Amazon. And so you're going to say, okay, so if we know that for a fact that the biggest sales days are around the 8th. They're going to be somewhere between probably the 16th and the 20th this year, maybe the 21st and 22nd, depending on when they say the last day for prime shipping is. And so we really, in order to get there for those, we need to make sure it's checked in by the 15th. So if you have 4 days before you send things in and they get checked in, you could send in as late as maybe the 10th, the 12th, and still be okay. If you have a 14-day turnaround from when you send items to when they get checked in, really December 1st, which is this Friday, is the last day. The other thing you have to think about is, will this sell in January? So if you have an item that is only really going to be popular at Christmas. So maybe you have a Hanukkah shirt. Hanukkah shirts are only going to sell for a certain period of time, and that period of time is different than, you know, the Christmas sales, because Hanukkah and Christmas are not on the same day. So, you know, Hanukkah starts on the 12th, I believe, this year. So, you know, if you have a Hanukkah shirt, it's not going to sell very well on December 30th, right? So you have less time than maybe somebody who's selling Nike shoes that is, you know, the people are going to buy for themselves with gift cards, that people who are going to have healthy living resolutions are going to go buy in January. So you have a little bit of time. Amazon gives deadlines, quote unquote, of like when to receive items, but that's kind of a flexible thing. It's a suggestion. They're saying if you get items in by this day, we promise that they'll be available by this day. But, you know, we see things going both ways all the time. So, you know, you need, if you something, and, you know, Denise has a good point, sometimes things do get moved around to fulfillment centers. So, you know, usually by sending smaller batches in the past, that has helped us avoid some of the fulfillment centers. But if you know, when you send in a big shipment, it goes to one warehouse, and then that warehouse is a distribution warehouse, where then it gets sent to another warehouse, you can bank on even more. And, you know, I've been to Amazon events, and people have asked about, you know, can they stop moving things around for holidays? And they pretty much flat out said no. So it's something we kind of have to adjust for. And so as we're looking for holiday specific things, you kind of need to build that uncertainty into your margins. So yeah, and they do change the warehouse distributions this time of year. So it's going to depend on your risk tolerance. You're going to see people in Facebook that are going to be saying, you know, absolutely send stuff in till the 20th. You can send toys in until the 27th. Things so well in January. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of sellers that have really great January months. There are also sellers that have abysmal January months. It's going to depend on what you have, and you have to think about, you want to make sure the items that you have in January are not the same things that stores are clearancing out at the end of December, because the prices on those items are going to tank because people, they see this giant profit margin, and so then they're going to get aggressive on pricing. People are going to freak out because of the storage, and those prices are going to go down. So you want to think about, it's really, when you look at when's the last date, you need to think about your risk tolerance. And you need to think about, you know, what is the seasonality of this item? Is it something like a Christmas tree that if it doesn't sell for Christmas, is probably not going to sell for the next year? I mean, if you miss Easter egg dye, if you send it in too late, you're holding that till next Easter, which sometimes can be even more than a year. So you need to think about, you know, will this sell other times of the year, and, you know, what is, you know, how much of this is going to be on clearance? Advent calendars all go on clearance, and then there's some of them that we know that people have been that people hold until the next year because they become collectibles. But, you know, are you willing to tie up that capital for that long, or risk that maybe that item that you thought might be a collectible isn't? So we need to think about that. Well, any other questions? Oh, didn't mean to de-slideshow there. I'm not seeing any other questions. Hopefully that means I answered all the ones that you were thinking about. I'm sorry it wasn't as much question. Oh, I see here's another one. We did some small test buys of seasonal items that we're hoping that we'll get some data for next year. So that is a good idea. Just make sure it's not trendy items. So you have to think about what is, you know, so data from one year to another. There are certain staples that are going to sell the same year to year, and there's certain things that are not. So. I think that might be all. Um, If you guys could say some prayers for my dad, he's going into bladder, he's getting some bladder cancer surgery. And so tomorrow, so if I could get some prayers for those. Yes, there will be a replay. I hope the lack of questions afterwards meant that I answered most of the questions that people had. I tried to really be watching the Academy Facebook group and make sure that I had stuff ready for the questions that I had been seeing. If you guys have any other questions, I'll kind of be off and on throughout the holiday weekend. But just remember that as you're looking at Black Friday, you want to, if nothing else, just keep thinking supply and demand, supply and demand. That's going to be the thing that dictates prices. So be thinking about that and your risk tolerance, and focus in on items that you know that you can move, double down on what's winning. And if you are in a cash drop situation, I would look at merchant fulfilling. That is it for tonight, guys. Have a great evening.